वेलकम टू टुडेज एडिशन ऑफ मेन स्ट्रीट विद हरप्रीत सिंह तूर। आप सब ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਨਮਸਕਾਰ, ਆਦਾਬ ਐਂਡ ਸ਼ਲੋਮ। You know, it's always curious how and where should I start, but there are so many things going on. But before I go there, I'm again going to say something that freedom of speech is very important. Freedom of press is very important, and freedom of thought is very important. If we don't appreciate that, and if we don't stand for it, that sooner or later we will start losing one thing after another, and ultimately we may end up where we really don't want to end up. So in other words, we should not hesitate from anybody sharing their thoughts. You may not agree with it. That's perfectly fine. You can let the person know that you don't agree with it. But at the same time, you should let the person have the free flow of their thoughts. Because unless you share the thoughts back and forth, you cannot change that person's mind. We should not forget that we are living in a world right now where everything is created an artificial bubble within this internet. What is happening is, once you go on internet, the algorithm which is used by any search engine, whether that's Bing by Microsoft, that's Google or Yahoo or Firefox web, you use you basically name any search engine, they have their algorithm, and based on that algorithm you get fed the information. I will give you a perfect example here. You go to your house and you listen to certain songs or bhajans or shabads in the evening. You do it 2 days in a row. Third day when you reach home and you click on your YouTube on your smartphone, what you will see, they will actually feed you immediately those related links. If you are watching bhajans, the bhajans will come, shabads will come. If you are watching some other nonsensical stuff, that will come, because algorithm is such. Now you leave your house, you come to your office, and at the office you do totally opposite of what you were doing at home, even though you are doing it on the smartphone. So when you will reach office, you will get a different kind of websites on that YouTube. So this is a backdoor way of controlling your mind, the way you think, the way you act, and that is creating one of the biggest issue for the young generation and coming generation. This is the generation of Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. It's like you do it immediately. Text messaging, WhatsApp messaging, and immediately you expect the answer. But in real life it is not like that. Everything takes time. And that is where the frustration starts. But at the same time, you are still in that bubble. That bubble actually controls your mind, and you need to get out of that bubble. That's where this free speech is so important. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and based on that, then you express yourself. Because sometimes, even though there is always a tilt either to the left or to the right, and these tilts actually sometimes are the tilts where they hurt the community. That's where the role of leadership of the community comes in. that how they should proceed. But the sad part is those leaders have their own personal interests. More important, how to stay in power. It's not them, it is the human nature. Once you are in power, you want to stay in power. You are assemblyman, you want to stay in there. You are councilman, you want to stay in there. You are a congressman, you want to stay there. So that then feeds into further into what you do. So again, conversation, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, it should be respected. Now we are going to talk about what I would say actually is starting from Ukraine war, because on 24th it was 1 year and we still don't know where we will end up. But there are few things which are getting more clear, if I may say. Russia was thinking that within 3 days they will occupy Ukraine. Western countries assume Russia will run over Ukraine. That was before the war started. Okay? Before that, in 2014, Crimea was annexed by Russia. Yes, at that time the reaction of Western countries was muted protest. South Ossetia, a lot of people, they have not even heard about it. Then there was part of Georgia, which was Russia was involved, and there was a muted protest to that. But there was one thing which I would say American policymakers at that time in 2014, Obama was the president at that time, they started actually sort of like training Russian soldiers into modern warfare. Modern warfare in the sense, for the NATO, they have their own way of fighting the war. Russians have their own way of fighting the wars. Okay, that actually brings me into India-Pakistan war also, because India-Pakistan, because they were part of the same country, same army under British Army. They learned the British way of fighting, even though over the time period there is some evolution between both the countries about how to fight, but a lot of things are still fundamentally the same when it comes down to that. But Western and Eastern fighting methods of Russia and Western countries, they are vastly different, no doubt about it. Russia has always had this thing where go in and destroy the infrastructure, demoralize the people, the population, and expect the population to cave in, and once the population caves in, the leadership will cave in. Or grab the leadership. Once you have the leadership, population will automatically get controlled. In Ukraine, neither of that happened. When Russia went into Ukraine, Ukraine actually fought back. Everybody was expecting that Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, will fall within 2 to 3 days in Russian hands. Ukrainians were ready and they fought it back, and they did not let it happen. And that actually started the whole war. And where we are today, we are going to take a break right here. After the break, I'm going to dissect what to expect based on what I think and what I have studied so far. And we will see what happens in the future. But like I always say, you have the number, it's 844-324-1300, or you can email me at justtoor@gmail.com, and I will be more than happy to answer and communicate. But let's take a break and then we will continue that. Welcome back to Mainstream with Harpreet Toor. Now we are going to continue where I left about Ukraine. So now where we actually stand when it comes down to Ukraine is after 1 year, NATO and US, they are supporting Ukraine with everything, with the training, the armament, and basically you name it. On the other side, we have Russia, and Western countries and NATO, they tried to isolate Russia by cutting off buying the oil, cutting off the gas purchase. Germany, which was heavy dependent on Russian natural gas supply for home heating and everything, they have also cut down and they are looking at the other sources. And believe it or not, United States is actually exporting oil and gas to those countries, which is, a lot of people, they don't know about it and they don't believe about it. Now, we have this group. On the other side, everybody did not fall in line with the United States and NATO to oppose Russia, because the other countries have their own interests. China, India, Pakistan, Iran, of course, some African countries, including even Brazil, did not fully got on board, because these countries, they have their own interests. Brazil actually is part of BRICS. If you haven't heard BRICS, what BRICS is, I will tell you it is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS. It's one of those organizations which was created some time back. So Russia has to sell the oil to get the money. So who is buying it? China and India. India needed the oil at the cheaper rate. When the United States implemented the sanctions on Iran, India definitely cut back on purchasing, the raw fuel from Iran, which actually, goes to refineries, the crude oil, what they call, to refine and then, give you the gas, the diesel, and everything, including plastic. India was able to, negotiate certain things, but most of imports from Iran, between India and Iran, they got, cut back. But with Russia, because India has a long-term relationship with Russia, people generally forget about it, that there was a time when America was supporting Pakistan for everything. And to India, it was Russia who was supporting for everything. And a lot of time, the resolutions which came to United Nations against India, they were vetoed by Russia. And same vice versa for Pakistan, it was America. So now India actually is giving Russia a support indirectly by buying the crude oil at a cutthroat rates, which is helping the current economy, which actually the Prime Minister Modi being smart enough to, and his government to smart enough to exploit that situation to the benefit not of the people but for the government, because for the people they are still paying the same gas prices, but yeah, they are getting extra money, and that money probably they are using it for infrastructure and some other projects, no doubt about it. And so that is one thing. The other thing basically is Iran supplied drones to Russia, which against Ukraine, which Russia used openly, openly admitting that they got it from Iran. Okay, Now China is planning to provide armament to Russia, some ammunition and some other stuff, even though China was providing some other stuff to Russia while everybody else cut back on the exports and everything, giving raw material and whatever else to the Russians. But still, if you go to Russia, on the Russian streets, you still get the Western items on the street. You can buy and whatever you want to buy. So clearly two different blocks are developing. In the meantime, Iran is going to get now the technology for the missiles, for the long-range missiles. Even though Iran has been trying to develop missiles, it has its own, it has tested its own missiles, but they have limitation, and with every test, whatever you learn, then you go and make improvement and do that. But in the meantime, Israel is attacking Iran and nobody is saying anything. That is another issue which after the break I'm going to talk about how this whole thing is. Now what is happening is, I will give you another example. India, when India was developing its technology, missile technology, and I do remember that it was during the previous Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's time, that there is a special propulsion fuel which is needed to go beyond certain height in the space when you go into the space. And India did not have the know-how. America was not giving it. India definitely asked Russia to supply, but Russia again refused. Because at that time, the world powers, they were working together that, okay, we do not want any other country to have long-range missile technology, this and that. So India developed that technology in-house, and they are now using it. So Iran is going to get help from Russia now. Now, when India and Russia being so close, when India needed that technology, Russia said no. But now Russia is going to provide to Iran some of the technologies, and maybe some of the technologies which it did say no to India at that time. Why? Because Russia needs Iranian support, like the drones, the kamikaze drones, what they call, and I assume you know what kamikaze drones are, and some other things, because Iran and Russia, they can go through the road, their businesses, they can actually, they are linked by land. So they can definitely, not directly direct border, but yes, they still can, ship the items on the ground from Iran to Russia and vice versa. Because if you ship via ocean, it takes long time, number one. Number two, it is more detectable, but if you do it online, it is less detectable, even though they have the satellites and everything. So that is, and North Korea already being what it is, so there is a new group actually which is coming up, which is Russia, China, and Iran with North Korea. We know that there is a tension between China and America about a lot of things, what is happening. Yeah, we recently had a balloon, which was funny, that reminded me that Marjorie Taylor Greene actually was seen walking into the US Congress with a balloon in her hand. You talk about bringing down the decorum of the house down to no decorum at all. But anyway, that's not the topic. So what is happening is, there is going to be a long drawn war, because nobody is willing to start the negotiations or stop the war. China has definitely put out a plan saying that okay, for the ceasefire, and they have done a couple of things, they put up a couple of points. But let's not forget, nobody will come to the negotiating table unless both sides realize that now is the time and the point where we should sit down and talk. NATO is offering Ukraine an olive branch, like they say in English, that Ukraine should come to the negotiating table for the ceasefire because it is the larger interest of NATO. Let us not forget that when Russia broke and Ukraine became a free and independent nation, Russia was one of the signatories to guarantee the borders of Ukraine. And what happened was Ukraine actually got attacked by Russia. It's interesting, but at the same time, it is what is happening and what is coming up. So let us take a break. After the break, I will be right back with some more insight into what's going on and what to expect and what could happen and what should not happen right after the break. Welcome back to Mainstream with Harpreet Singh Toor. Now we are going to continue about this whole thing going on the world stage. We should not forget that the inflation which actually hit the whole world, not just the United States, but the whole world. In the rest of the world, it is even worse than what it was here, right here in the United States. Is actually a product of combination of certain things. Okay, Ukraine war, and during the pandemic, let me mention something here. If the people don't know what was happening till pandemic hit the world, all the businesses were producing on demand. Basically, on demand is what? If I'm ordering this mouse or this laptop, there is a limited supply out there. And once the supply goes beyond that, below that level, only then they produce the next batch of that item. So during the COVID, all of a sudden, because shopping stopped, the demand stopped and the factories stopped. There are no warehouses where they retain the supplies for 2 months or 3 months anymore. So because there were no products, so when the society started opening up, the demand again started coming back. Now the production lines are idle, they are not working. So there are limited items which are available. So the manufacturers and the retailers, they pushed up the price to make money at that point. And that's another factor to raise the prices of those items. Same thing with the oil. Refineries were shut down, and it takes time for any refinery to restart. That's why the oil prices went up, and now they are coming down. They will go on coming down the road. But yes, the immediate effect of higher oil prices, the gas price, hits the president's rating, even though president may not have anything to do with it. I'm not trying to protect Joe Biden. Let me make it clear. What I'm trying to do here is I'm just letting you know how the system works. We need to understand that. So that is again Ukraine war with the all of a sudden certain items on demand for certain products. That one thing, the non-shipment of the wheat and sunflower from Ukraine to rest of the world, pushed up the prices for the food, and of course the weather has its own role to play into it. That's one part. The other part which I want to talk about is now United States is supporting Ukraine against Russia for unauthorized illegal occupation. Okay, I fully agree with it. I don't question that. But on the contrary, United States is helping Israel to occupy the Palestinian territory and annex it, built up their own more population, built up their own whatever they want to do, and providing them money and armament and everything and protection. Two different standards. In the name of what? National security, national interests. The interesting thing, another interesting thing into it, this whole scenario for me is when you look at the whole world map, during the Cold War, after the breakup of Russia, excuse me, I have this thing with my throat. Breakup of Russia, after the breakup for Russia was pushed to be just another country. But nobody would like, if you are on the top and all of a sudden, yes, you lost valuable assets, but in the meantime, just to say you're nobody, that hurts. And that's where Russia in the meantime was trying to come up. And Putin, being from KGB, which was before Russia broke, he was part of KGB. And after Russia broke, he rose rapidly through, because he knew the people, he had the connections, he had the channels, and he reached where he reached. So that's hypocrisy. That supporting Israel for occupying Palestinians, but opposing Russia for doing what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Providing ammunition to Saudi Arabia, which is providing further that ammunition to Yemenis in the Yemen civil war. Even though now there is a ceasefire, the reason why there is a ceasefire is because what is happening is, or what happened at the ceasefire is because the Yemen group, supported by Iran is heavy on those supported by Saudi Arabia. So they came to a mutual ceasefire. Okay. Now, moving further, what could happen? That is interesting for me. I really wish I have those, those magic glass where I can see the future and predict something. I don't. But at the same time, let's not forget one thing. Russia definitely is an atomic power. It does have atomic power. It does have missile technology. It does have the factories, even though those factories they may be idle for a long time, but they do have it and they can start producing, which they have. They definitely have the Air Force know-how, and they have the plane. There is a Su-57, which the Britishers has confirmed that Russia is using it, which is the 5th generation fighter. Again, for the people who don't know what 5th generation fighter is, something which we can talk later on, maybe one day I will definitely go over it, but not today. So Russia definitely is not going to take this lying down. Putin is right now pushed into a corner. Now, China supplying armament to Putin it can has two effects. One, of course, China is sending a signal to US that if you don't respect me, then I have my own way of getting respect. At the same time, by providing ammunition to Russia, China can say that, okay, you probably will lose the war, and if I haven't supplied you with XYZ, you definitely would have lost the war. But right now, the war is at standstill. You have gained some territory. Let's come to a negotiating table and have a peace plan and negotiate a peace and end the war. And China can look another, a feather in its hat. It's a big country, and it can claim that, okay, look what I did. USA could not do it. NATO's could not do it. I have done it. So it can then go out and sell that to other nations. That is the deeper politics than the normal politics, which you and I look and understand. So that is another issue which we need to look at. And also, we know what North Korea is doing, and it cannot do what it is doing unless China is providing some of the stuff in the black market or otherwise, or China is just looking the other way around. I will give you an example. The fight between Jammu and Kashmir and between India and Pakistan, the overall, when the people come in from Pakistan, the Pakistan army just looks the other way and they are like, we don't know. And the people, when they go from India into Pakistan to do certain things, Indian army says, we don't know. We have no idea what's going on. So same way, China is looking the other way when the things are being supplied to Russia, either by North Korea, which has to go through China, and whatever China will supply, that will be, like poking into the eye of United States, even though it is telling United States that, okay, whatever you want to do, you can do it. But let's not forget one more factor here. The businesses which made China what China is, they have their own interest. They function beyond these governments. And how they will react, how they will move, we'll talk right after the break, and what could happen to certain businesses and how India is benefiting from that. It may not be the policies of the current government or the previous government, but the international factors which are benefiting with a wind blowing in favor of India right after the break. Welcome back to Mainstream again. We are entering to the final segment for today's show. Yeah, we were talking about the businesses and how the big businesses, the tech companies and other manufacturers, they can actually help India to develop more sophisticated items on their land. The Prime Minister Modi had Make in India. Whether the policies of Indian government, they may help, they may not help. Even though the freedom of press is not what it used to be, based on what I know, again, but there are some factors which will benefit India anyway. With the deterioration of relations between China and USA, China is what China is because USA made China what it is today. The businesses and the US government's policies. With the COVID and the strict policies of China, some of the manufacturers already started shipping out the manufacturing to neighboring countries. Vietnam is another one. And let's not forget one thing. Vietnam and China, they are not friends. Okay? Last year, the Fox manufacturer, which is one of the biggest manufacturer for Apple, they announced they are going to establish a Apple iPhone manufacturing unit in India. There are some other manufacturing things also. And also, India was offered to manufacture F-16 in India under strict controls that nothing can be shared with anybody, which is still up in the air. I don't know if that will happen or not. So in other words, if these things are happening, the businesses are going to shift to India, manufacturing and otherwise, and that will increase the level of knowledge of the Indians, and they are smart, no doubt about it. They will capture it and they will start competing. So intellectually it will elevate their status as intellectuals. Let's not forget a lot of the software which is right now, we have all these software engineers and other electronic engineers coming from India. It was in 1987 when Sam Petroda was tapped in by Rajiv Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India, to start the computer and information technology information in India. It took some years to groom, and look where India is today. Same ways, when these companies will start establishing business there, they will groom and they will grow. The balloon actually which was caught and finally shot down in Atlantic Ocean, which was a Chinese balloon, originally it was developed right here by, I think, Google. They were doing some experiment, and from there the technology was then shifted. Reverse engineering is done, let's not forget that. If I remind you, when Osama bin Laden was killed, one of the US helicopter crashed in that compound, and before the Americans left that compound, they blew up that helicopter because it crashed, because they didn't want any information going into Chinese hands, of course Pakistani hands also, for reverse engineering. Then America paid Pakistan to get the remainder out of that country. Do I believe everything got out? I don't think so. Now China has its own stealth planes, the bombers and fighter planes. That stealth technology, I will not be surprised if we find out down the road that some of that stealth technology was, engineered back from whatever was left of that plane, that helicopter in Pakistan. So this is where India can have benefit. And also on the other side, the other Western countries, including NATO countries plus UK, they're also reaching out to India for their own products and everything. So that's what is happening in that part of the continent. Now coming to right here, United States, we have the election coming up. We have a lot of things going on, but there was one thing which I spoke previously, but I'm going to talk about that again today. Ann Coulter, who is actually one of the spokesperson within GOP, she has her own views. She's anti-immigrant. She told Nikki Haley, I'm quoting what she said, and let's not forget, Nikki Haley actually is Nikki Randhawa. Haley is her name after she got married. Go back to own country, that's what she said. I need to She said that taking down parts of American history like stars and bars, after Minnesota, where this black gentleman was killed by a police officer by putting him down, holding his knee on the neck. At that time, Nikki Haley took that down. She said I need to immigrate to India. That is Ann Coulter saying, I need to immigrate to India so I can demand that they start taking down parts of their history, which is Indian history, Coulter said on right-wing radio host Mark Simon's show. What's the worshipping of the cows? They are all starving over there and they are worshipping cows. Okay? And then she mentioned about baby cakes. And then she also said, why don't you go back to your own country and reconsider that history? That is, I think, a lesson, even though what she said is not right. In India also, there are people who are trying to rewrite the history. Let's not forget, the Indian structure is federal structure, and also India does not, within the constitution, it does not favor one faith over another faith, even though we know that population wise it's a way majority Hindu nation, no doubt about it. And there is more and more showing off of that part of the culture in India, which actually is not the good thing in the long run. Again, that's based on what I think. The population at the time of independence was same, about 12%, 11% of Muslims, 82% of Hindus, and some other remainder was others, the Sikhs and Christians. That percentage is still there. Okay, so let's not get lost in that. With that note, till next time, good night and good luck.